I am now inviting everyone to feel the presence of the Almighty as we pray the AUF prayer, followed by the singing of the national anthem.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, and we, the AF community, consecrate ourselves to the cause of truth, that in all our aspirations we may contribute to the greater good. Lord, from the heart of the Church, grant us the commitment to serve, promote the dignity of every person, and build an authentic human society. May we constantly strive to become mabuti at malasakit sa kapwa, that we may attain total development of humanity for your greater glory. Amen. Saint Francis of Assisi, teach us to follow your footsteps by living simple life. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Good day, Angelinians. Paxet Venia Adeo. I am Mrs. Forteza Canlas, your lecturer for this session. With me today is Ma'am Trixie Arceo.
Good day, Angelinians. Paxet Venia Adeo.
Much has been said about developing information and media literacy, the patterns of development, and the well written text. Hence, this module on academic writing in the discipline will give us a more focus towards writing for a formal or academic standpoint. Before we delve into the different kinds of academic paper, it is important that you know first what academic writing is. As presented in the slide, academic writing is formal writing used to communicate ideas, information, and research to the academic community. When we say academic community, we refer to a group of people in higher educational institutions who continuously engage in core intellectual activities such as teaching, learning, and research. Some examples of academic writing are journal articles, essays, dissertation, textbooks, and research papers. Academic writing is also considered a formal style of writing because it has specific conventions in terms of style, structure, and content. We are to explain all those conventions as we go along in this lecture. With that given definition, we can therefore say that academic writing is meant for academics. When we say academics, we refer to teachers or researchers at colleges or universities. Academics also refers to a study of other people's findings on the subject matter. From James Hartley of Colorado Technical College, academic writing refers to a style of expression that researchers use to define the intellectual boundaries of their disciplines and specific areas of expertise. When we refer to the style of expression in academic writing, we focus on the characteristics of academic writing, which include a formal tone, use of the third person rather than first person perspective, a clear focus on the research problem under investigation, and precise word choice. Let us now proceed to the characteristics of academic writing. The first characteristic of academic writing is formal and unbiased. Before you begin writing or even researching for your paper, you must read the assignment sheet thoroughly and understand what you are being asked for. So, most of the time, when someone makes a mistake in regard to the academic writing task, it is because they did not understand what was being asked of them. If you don't understand the details of the assignment, you could end up doing the whole assignment wrong. As what is presented in this slide, it is very important to consider that your points should be unbiased, taking into consideration all the sides of the issue. There must be a fair and accurate representation of the works of other researchers presenting arguments or claims on evidence. Your information literacy skills will be of great help too in your writing by citing your references correctly. In addition to applying balance in your academic writing, it is essential that you write your thesis statement effectively. Okay, so this is what persuades your reader. You should be able to argue your main points using the information that you research. Without evidence or proof, your points aren't going to persuade the reader. Remember that advancing an argument is one of the most important aspects of a paper. That is why the use of formal language or formal style is very true for academic writing. You should avoid using slang. So when we say slang, we refer to colloquialisms or idioms. Okay, also, you should avoid using cliches, which refer to overused or worn out expressions. And also, you should avoid using contractions and conversational phrases. The next slide shows you the examples in a table form presenting the informal and formal counterpart of such words or phrases or expressions used in writing. Another characteristic of academic writing is clear and precise. For this characteristic, you need to avoid Okay, so you need to avoid the use of jargon and obscure or outdated words as applied in the given examples. You may use words that are as close to everyday language as possible, but please remember that you are still maintaining an academic tone. Always put that in mind. With word choice, it is also important that you choose the right word for your intended point. So, some students would be having a mistake on this. For example, they would choose the word affect when they should have chosen the word effect. So, you see, it affects the clarity of your writing. Hence, writers need to understand the difference and choose the right terms. Let us now move on to the next characteristic, which is focused and well structured. When you write, your thoughts need to be explained in a logical sequence as outlined in your introduction or introductory part of your paper. Okay, so in here, you need to also take note of the structure of the body of your paper in a manner that flows. So how can this be achieved? Ideas should be grouped according to how they relate to each other, not all over the place. The next slide shows you the three levels of structure when you organize your ideas in your paper. In this slide, I would like you to recall that a sentence at its most basic consists of one main clause, and writers should limit each sentence to one idea. If a writer does not properly construct a sentence, readers will have a hard time understanding the point being made. That is why it is very important that at this point of your senior high school year, you have already mastered the skill of composing or writing your own sentences according to structure. Do you know how to construct a simple, compound, complex, and compound complex sentence? If you haven't mastered the skill yet, you still have a lot of time to practice. Next is for paragraph structure. Remember also that each paragraph is a unit and should have only one clear idea. Oftentimes, there are too few paragraphs in a paper. Instead of breaking large paragraphs into smaller ones, they attempt to fit too much information in one. It is important, therefore, that each main idea has its own paragraph so that it can be fully explored. When a new idea arises, you should start a new paragraph. By the time that you have mastered the structure of sentences and paragraphs, the overall structure is achieved. The last but not the least characteristic is well sourced. So in this slide, it tells you that you need to use sources to support their claims, apply the skills you learned in information literacy, use your critical thinking skills, consider which sources are credible and appropriate to use in academic writing, and acknowledge your sources. So, Angelinians, always remember this: forgetting to cite or citing improperly or incorrectly makes you guilty of plagiarizing. Why? With all of the information handed out to you at the beginning of each academic term about plagiarism, even teaching you how to do paraphrasing correctly, you can no longer claim ignorance on the matter. It is important that all ideas borrowed from other work, even if paraphrased, are cited properly in a paper using an accepted academic style. So again, this contributes to information and media literacy skills. Now that we are done learning about academic writing, its definition and characteristics, we now proceed to its partner or counterpart, which is professional writing. As what is presented in the slide, professional writing commonly refers broadly to text written for business purposes. That is why it may involve private businesses, government corporations, and offices. Ducarpe expounds it more as all about conveying information in the workplace. It is different from creative writing like novels, which are meant to entertain. Professional writing, he added, seeks to inform, persuade, or instruct others in a workplace and business environment. For Barrett claims professional writing as most often applied in technical writing. In turn, from Moxley, technical writing refers to documents that often explain technical processes or explain how to do something, such as technical descriptions and instructions and process reports. Which would now lead us to this question: how is academic writing different from other forms of writing? The table shows us the differences of academic writing from business or professional writing and from personal writing in terms of purpose, audience, style, and basis. You will see that personal writing is the easiest because no research is required. You are just to write based on personal thoughts or feelings, unlike in academic writing and professional writing. In terms of audience, business or professional writing receives larger audience than academic and personal writing. Both academic writing and business or professional writing use research as its basis for writing, while for the style aspect, business or professional writing follows a format, but for academic writing, the format or style is always formal. Since academic and professional writing have different styles but are the same in some aspects, you might find it challenging to discern when to write academically or professionally. It is therefore important that you understand the similarities and the differences between these two styles of writing. Let's now have a discussion of the components of academic and professional writing. We start with context. Based on the slide, we can conclude that the context of academic writing in terms of place, for example, is in universities or colleges, while business establishments or corporations is the context of professional writing. Masterclass shares to us the four types of context in writing. The first one is historical context. Providing the time period and its current events can inform the general mood of the era, setting the stage for the tone of your piece of writing and creating an understanding of the society at the time. Historical context can therefore inform the atmosphere for your audience, giving them context for how people felt and behaved during that period in history, such as the clothing styles of the time or even the specific word choice, probably like slang, that was used in that era. The second is physical context. The attributes of a place can also inform how a plot unfolds or how characters develop. The physical environment you establish for your writing will influence how certain characters act and how the audience understands them. A story about characters escaping a natural disaster in Tacloban City will have a different setup than if they were escaping one in Baguio City. Your environment, therefore, can dictate how a plot unfolds, but it is important to provide readers with enough detail for them to understand why. The third is cultural context. When we say cultural context, we are taking into consideration these elements such as beliefs, religion, marriage, food, and clothing. So sometimes these are needed to be provided in order to fully understand an author's story. And the last one is situational context. So, situational context is why something is happening based on the event itself. With situational context, the audience is able to understand how the circumstances of the occurring event affect those involved. The second component is the message or content. The main difference between context and content is that content refers to the topics or matter treated in a work, particularly a written work, whereas context refers to the components of a text that surround a word or passage and help the reader to understand its meaning. Lastly, message includes the main topic and the details that support it. These details may be in the form of facts, statistics, testimonies, and observation. The third component is the purpose. The goal of your paper is to support the argument you post as your topic. So your argument gives you a purpose. The most common purposes in academic writing are to persuade, analyze or synthesize, and inform. There are two levels of purpose in writing. Okay, let's now take a look at the examples for general and specific purpose in this slide. So the general purpose is to persuade grade 11 students to save money. Specific purpose, our example is to teach grade 11 students how to control spending too much money on online purchases. Okay, so I think most of our students can relate to this for online purchases. The fifth component is language. Okay, so please take note that you need to follow the standard form and usage of language in both academic and professional writing. The fifth component is the audience, which is the receiver of the message. As with all writing, academic writing is directed to a specific audience in mind. Unless your instructor says otherwise, consider your instructor as your audience. So you will have to engage her with your ideas and catch her interest with your writing style. Imagine that she's also skeptical, so that you must use the appropriate reasoning and evidence to convince her of your ideas. The last component of academic and professional writing is product. So these are the outputs you intend to produce after considering all other components. So in the table, you'll see the academic writing outputs compared with professional writing outputs. So under academic writing outputs, we have academic essay, thesis or dissertation, library research, reaction paper, book review, literature review, research report, project proposal, and position paper. While for professional writing, here are its outputs: instructional manuals, brochure, business correspondence, business and technical reports, resume, cover letters, and emails. Now that we are done comparing academic writing from professional writing, let us now proceed to the types of academic writing. Many of these are common requirements in a student's academic life, from junior high school, senior high school, college, and even up to the graduate school. To become a first rate scholastic writer, you must be able to identify the unique features of and requirements in composing texts that are useful across disciplines. Let us now begin with the first one, or the first type, the book review or article critic. As presented in the slide, a book reviewer and article critic is a specialized form of academic writing in which a reviewer evaluates the contribution to knowledge of scholarly works such as academic books and journal articles. It may also consist of 250 to 750 words, but is not a summary. Remember that a summary of a research article requires you to share the key points of the article so your reader can get a clear picture of what the article is about. A critic may include a brief summary, but the main focus should be on your evaluation and analysis of the research itself. So instead of simply summarizing the main points of the article, you must critic them. This is where most students make a mistake. They offer a mere summary of the research article they read. Journal articles already have summaries. Your professor does not want to get that. They want your unique opinion and discussion. A book review or article critic is also different from a movie review that you see in newspapers. It's also a critical assessment, analysis, or evaluation of a work. You cannot critic a research article before you read and understand it. These journal articles can be quite lengthy and they often involve terms you don't understand. That is why simple reading won't be enough. You'll have to engage in active and close reading, accompanied with some research, so you can define and understand the terms that are new to you. When you close read, you observe facts and details about the text. You may focus on a particular passage or on the text as a whole. Your aim may be to notice all striking features of the text, including rhetorical features, structural elements, and cultural references. Last in this slide, a book review or article critic also involves skills in critical thinking and recognizing arguments. To continue, the book review or article critic addresses a more specific audience, offers a critical response to a published scholarly work, uses proof and logical reasoning to substantiate or prove opinions. You should provide not only your impressions of the article, but also evidence that backs them up as well. Okay, so also in this slide, book review or article critic processes ideas and theories, revisits and extends ideas in a specific field of study, and presents analytical responses. Okay, that is why an article critic is also known as a response paper. It's a formal evaluation of a journal article or another type of literary or scientific content where your main goal is to show whether or not the author provided reasonable arguments and facts for their main points. With all of those tenets or characteristics of a book review or an article critic, it is very important that you keep this in mind. Book reviews must not be mistaken for book reports, which are focused on describing the plot, characters, or idea of a certain work. We now proceed to the main purposes of writing an article critic. From the enumerated purposes in this slide, please remember that the article critic is not a summary. It is an analysis from a critical point of view. Although your main purpose is not persuasion, you still have to develop a convincing discussion. The succeeding two types of academic writing are already discussed in your Practical Research 1 subject. So, this part of the lecture gives a reiteration of the concepts related to literature review and research report. Let us now have the literature review. So, the literature review provides an overview of a specific topic. Not to be confused with a book review, a literature review is a survey of scholarly resources or scholarly sources on a specific topic. It provides an overview of current knowledge, allowing you to identify relevant theories, methods, and gaps in the existing research. Literature review is also an advanced form of academic writing. A good literature review does not just summarize sources, it analyzes, synthesizes, and critically evaluates to give a clear picture of the state of knowledge on the subject. In addition, literature review critically analyzes the relationship among different scholarly works and the current work. It can also be written as a standalone paper or as part of a research paper explaining a theoretical framework and related studies. So, Angelinians, please remember this. When you write a thesis, dissertation, or research paper, you will have to conduct a literature review to situate your research within existing knowledge. The literature review gives you a chance to demonstrate your familiarity with the topic and scholarly context, develop a theoretical framework, and methodology for your research, position yourself in relation to other researchers and theorists, show how your research addresses a gap or contributes to a debate. Okay, so on the other hand, the purpose of that what we call a standalone paper is to evaluate the current state of research and demonstrate your knowledge of scholarly debates around a topic. Okay, next point. It also tests your ability to evaluate studies for their validity and reliability. So, unlike an annotated bibliography, when we say annotated bibliography, we are referring to a list of citations for various books, articles, and other sources on a topic. Unlike an annotated bibliography, which presents a summary of a book or article, a literature review combines both summary and synthesis, that is, linking different sources. Okay, so, as a review, when we say synthesis, we are talking about or referring to a written discussion that draws on one or more sources. Your ability to write synthesis depends on your ability to infer relationships among sources, such as essays, articles, fiction, also non written sources, such as lectures, interviews, and observations. This process is nothing new for you since you infer relationships all the time. Say, between something you've read in the newspaper and something you've seen for yourself, or between the teaching styles of your favorite and least favorite instructors. In fact, if you have written research papers, you have already written syntheses. In an academic synthesis, you make explicit the relationships that you have inferred among separate sources. An executive summary, on the other hand, is a thorough overview of a research report or other type of document that synthesizes key points for its readers, saving them time and preparing them to understand the study's overall content. It is a separate, standalone document of sufficient detail and clarity to ensure that the reader can completely understand the contents of the main research study. To continue, a literature review surveys scholarly work such as academic books, but not textbooks, computerized databases, conference proceedings, dissertations, or thesis. So, a dissertation or thesis is a long piece of academic writing based on original research, which is submitted as part of a doctoral, master's, or bachelor's degree. Next is for empirical studies. When we say empirical studies or empirical research, which is based on observed and measured phenomena and derives knowledge from actual experience rather than from theory or belief. Empirical studies also describe what is happening based on direct observation, focus group discussions, and in depth interviews, which are defined as qualitative studies. So, this include case reports and research studies. In addition, empirical studies also aim to highlight statistical associations between variables or to establish the occurrence or incidence of a phenomenon should utilize quantitative methods. So next would be the government reports, historical records, journal articles, monographs. So a scholarly monograph is a book of 200 to 300 pages that is written by one or more authors. Monographs contain considerably more information than conference papers or journal articles. The author did extensive research about the topic. Monographs provide an exhaustive examination of the subject or an in depth treatment. Okay, and then last in this PowerPoint slide are the statistical handbooks. We now proceed to the functions of a literature review. So we have justifies a research question, method, or theoretical and conceptual framework, establishes the relevance of a topic, provides necessary information to better understand a specific topic or study, shows reviewers familiarity and mastery of the topic, establishes the niche of the study, resolves conflict among contradictory studies. Therefore, it is very important to say that a literature review will enable you to identify other research that supports or corroborates your findings, as well as results that differ, enabling you to position your research in the field. Conducting a literature review is essential for developing a research idea, to consolidate what is already known about a subject, and to enable you to identify any knowledge gaps and how your research could contribute to further understanding. Let's now have the structure of a literature review. Okay, so for the introduction part, the introduction should clearly establish the focus and purpose of the literature review. So give some background on the topic and its importance, discuss the scope of the literature you will review, for example, the time period of your sources, and state your objective. So what new insight will you draw from the literature? Next part is the body of a literature review. As you write, you can follow these tips. So, summarize and synthesize. This is giving an overview of the main points of each source and combine them into a coherent whole. Second is analyze and interpret. So, don't just paraphrase other researchers, add your own interpretations where possible, discussing the significance of findings in relation to the literature as a whole. And then next, you are to critically evaluate. So, how are you to do that? Mention the strengths and weaknesses of your sources. And lastly, you may write in well structured paragraphs. So, how can you achieve that? You may use transition words or devices and topic sentences to draw connections, comparisons, and contrasts. So, in the conclusion, you should summarize the key findings you have taken from the literature and you should emphasize their significance. If you are writing a standalone paper, you can discuss the overall implications of the literature or make suggestions for future research based on the gaps you have identified. When you've finished writing and revising your literature review, don't forget to proofread thoroughly before submitting. Okay, so we now proceed to the guidelines in writing a literature review. Okay, so remember that AUF as a whole follows the APA documentation style. Okay, so also regarding the number of sources, sometimes it will be your professor who will give you the required number of sources, but this should not limit you in including more sources that are important or needed in your study. Also, AUF University Library has a number of these online databases useful for your research works. Okay, so it is very important to note. Okay, so going back, it is very important to note in here that the application of your information and media literacy skills is greatly needed in literature search. So we now proceed to the evaluation and analysis of articles. In this slide, I believe, okay, at this point, you are already done or still working on your literature review for your practical research one subject. So please be guided by these steps. Okay, so for our last slide for literature review, so your mastery of composing your own sentences here is very important. That's why you need to state clearly your thesis or main argument. Also, to reiterate what your practical research teacher reminded you, if you say that no studies have been conducted on one aspect of your topic, justify it. Direct the readers to other related literature reviews that cover items which you do not intend to cover. Never treat a literature review as a series of annotated bibliography. Then you are to use headings and subheadings to classify the parts of your topic. Use effective transitions to make your review easier to read and understand. The body of literature review can be organized thematically, methodologically, or chronologically. Use direct quotations sparingly and clarify important definitions. Okay, so we now proceed to the research report. Okay, so research report is a medium to communicate research work with relevant people. It is also a good source of preservation of a research work for the future reference. Research reports present the results of formal investigations into the properties, behaviors, structures, and principles of material and conceptual entities. Almost any physical phenomenon or concept may be investigated in a research framework. Okay, so we now have the project proposal. So the project proposal functions as the working document between agency and client before a potential initiation of the project. Thus, the project proposal is used to define the objectives and requirements of a project for the external party. For the internal party, it is a method to analyze the feasibility and profitability of the project. Okay, so we now have the position paper as a type of academic writing that presents one stand or viewpoint on a particular issue. So its main objective is to take part in larger debate by stating your arguments and proposed course of action. And that ends our lecture for this session. Thank you, and may the good Lord reward us always.